Hello, and welcome to the Projector Stories podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Laura. I'm a 5/1 splenic projector.
And I'm Sarah, a 1/3 emotional projector.
And welcome back to our show. If this is your first time or repeated time here, we are happy to talk into your ear holes and excited to 1156 it, as we like to say, talking about the stories that we go through in our deconditioning human design process. So, Sarah, any exciting things happened this past week for you that you would like to share in terms of deconditioning or what have you?
It's funny because I'm like, I don't know. One thing that did happen, which is interesting, I guess, because um with my so I work with my friend Steffi, and she and I and one of our other friends who also work with us have another podcast, and somebody actually initiated wanting to come on the podcast. And I was just like, okay, but like how can we do this non-strategically? And I was being really anal retentive about it because I was like, okay, like I don't want to strategize this. I was joking with Steffi. I was like, Laura's usually the one who will call me out for trying to strategize things, and now I'm calling everybody else out.
Are both of your other hosts receptive minds?
They're both receptive minds. So
Oh,
yeah,
so
so
it's triple receptive. So you
everyone.
can let the additional new person, the guest, be the strategic one if they're going to come on and do it. I don't know. It's interesting, like having, well, for you and me, it's just the two of us, but having groups of three people, it affects how conversations go with us projectors. Usually, someone ends up being the third wheel, and in my like actual reality muggle life, that's usually me where I just sit and like don't participate in conversations. So I don't know how it goes for you with
Yeah.
that juggle, but I don't know. Maybe
Well,
it's possible. Like, did you manage to figure it out or
no,
anything?
no, we haven't managed to figure it out yet. But I will say, like, the other thing that happened, and I think this may have been slightly, maybe not like a inspired by our podcast, but the other conversation that we had was around how we want to make it less structured. So the one that I'm on with Steffi less structured. And I was just like, that's all fine and well, but this podcast is a one-to-one projector podcast. And so having a non-structured thing, it's like when you're done talking, then I talk. But when there's a non-structured podcast with three people, two of them being generators, I was like, I need to be invited to talk then instead of it being like sequential. Because the other thing is that this is a penta, right? Like we're dealing with penta energy instead of just like our composite chart.
Well, this goes back to our roots and our origins being on Clubhouse because we had I already forgot what it's called, mystery school group. And it was 4 or 5 of us on the regular, Joey, you, me, Donna Lynn, and sometimes Amy. And I would usually shut up until someone called on me. So
Yeah.
it's easier that way. I'm not the type of person that's gonna like force my opinion on anyone, and that's kind of a topic that I've experienced this past week. I don't have the gate of opinion, so I'm usually not invited to share my opinions within most conversations unless it's a one-on-one like this. So yeah, like being called out in that context is helpful, but do they call you out? Do they,
Well,
pick
we're
on
gonna
you to
see.
speak?
We're gonna see because Kristen's been she's had a baby, and so like, we really haven't been podcasting, but I was like, yeah, I'm not going to interject. So we gotta call me out. You can call me out if you want to hear something from me, because before it was sequential, which is strategic, mind
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Um and so it's complicated. It's complicated too because it's like there's that whole thing of once you're invited in as a projector, you can kind of just do whatever you want. But that doesn't necessarily feel good when you're dealing with two generators who are responding, to like just be like the freaking pointy aura that that just needs to needle their way in. So
Yeah.
so it's not to say that, the other thing that I realized too, this is an important one. I've been eating calmly by myself with my eyes glued to my food, because I have in my PHS, I have calm touch as my determination, and I'm in the Ajna binary, so the vision that I have around it is important, and the external vision I have with it. And I was being very stringent on, okay, I'm not eating with anyone. I can't be distracted in any way to begin, because how else are you going to really know if it's working or not? And then I decided this past week, because I'm staying with family and it's just uncomfortable for everyone for me to be so reclusive with my meals, um, that it was time to, or I just said, okay, how about on Sundays we will eat together and I'll see how I feel. I'll see how my stomach feels. We'll cook together, we'll eat together, and I'll see how it goes. Like, not making any promises, but I want to, because if we're doing it in a calm environment, I can look at my food. Potentially, I don't need all of this stimulation completely gone. I just need to feel calm, and I need it to be calm, even if that doesn't mean that it's like complete
Well,
just silence. Yeah. So,
that brings up an interesting point. To interrupt you, I saw in one of the Facebook groups commentary about this, about the three different binaries for color and the ways that they're grouped together. Because you and I are in like the 3-4 group, and that is mutative. Like we can control our environment to accommodate it, or like someone with third color can control the food, the temperature of their food that they're eating. Whereas you and I, we can control the environment, and within it there is a quote of like Ross saying like he can tell everyone to calm down. Like he can tell he as a manifestor can initiate the space and the energetic frequency where he's in and tell people like, hey, you have to calm down. I'm eating right now. Which that in of itself seems kind of stimulating for someone to be shouting at everyone else to calm down. But in terms of colors 5 and 6, they're selective. So they have to choose the environments rather than like manipulate them themselves. Like you can't turn on the sun at night. You can't turn off the sun during the day. You have to be selective about when you're eating. And same goes for sound to a certain extent. So it's interesting because like I feel like that would work then to like tell your family like, hey, like this is my determination. We're gonna do this, but we're gonna do it calmly.
yeah.
If they're inviting you to do so, right? If you're being recognized.
Well, and everyone is calm. And I think part of the problem was when I first moved here, they really enjoy eating out a lot. And so I would be eating out
Oh
a lot
yeah.
with them. And so it was hard. It's really hard to ascertain like what was making the stomach problems really inflamed. If it was just, the eating out, or if it was the eating around specific people, or if it was eating around people in general, if it was eating around conversations where I had to participate. So I just, like a psychopath, knocked everything out and was like, this is how I have to eat right now, because I literally just went and got an endoscopy, and I'm on medication because of my stomach. Like I'm not playing around with this because nothing else is working. So I went whole hog, and then I decided, okay, let's incorporate, almost similar to like a elimination diet. Like let's incorporate small stimulations that are
Yeah.
really going to take me out of my calmness and see what happens. And so I didn't have any issues. I really didn't. And that is all to say, that potentially sometimes we have to be really stringent in the beginning of the experiment, because you have to see what works, and then it's like gently including things into your life and seeing what causes you to go into transference, or what causes you to, your determination to go into transference, or what have you. So it's like the experiment, I think, and this is why Ra always talks about like the people who are really radical about it in the beginning, like they're gonna get the furthest at first, because you can see the results immediately, but it's also really alienating, probably for everyone, not just for people with calm determination. And so seeing where you can kind of live your life receptively as well, alongside of being correct in your different things. Um, yeah, something that I talked about. I think this is something that I talked about last week too, of just like needing to, oh crap, I forgot what I was gonna say. All right, Laura, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of something I said to you or we talked about earlier this week on the side, which was how threes are resilient for trial and error. Like they have a natural built-in resiliency that allows them to try things to see what works and doesn't work. And part of that is experimenting. And I have two third lines in my chart, and I think both are, I mean, they're on the design side. So my personality, maybe my body is equipped to be a itty bitty bit resilient, but my mind is not. Like my mind is like, no, we are not going to try anything at all because what if we fail? Like we are not equipped to deal with failure. Like that's not me. That's not this form. And so I've really struggled to break the rules to try to be less radical. Well, not less radical, but just like more open with what I'm trying to see what rules are hard and fast and which ones are softer in terms of, waiting for invitations and initiating and all that. So yeah, it's been difficult to try to not be a goody two shoes.
Oh
But
yeah. Well,
huh?
go ahead.
Oh no, that was it.
I was gonna say, and I was listening to Marianne Winiger talk about generators and projectors, and it really is a dance. So the point that I was trying to, or the to circle everything back to the, having this unstructured podcast with two generators, it's like there's still a dance there, even if I have been invited. So starting to just swing my sword around because I've been invited doesn't feel good, even if I can get away with it, right? Like I can get away with it, but it doesn't feel good. So, like, there is some things that no matter how many invitations you have from generators, you're never going to be able to just wield your aura all over the place and make sure that it feels good just by and large, just because you have that initial invite and it's correct to be in that relationship. So, yeah, that's been those two things with deconditioning have been interesting to see the stuff with calm determination and how really truly effective it was, and also how deeply I need to be stringent about the way that I do it. And I think, one of the things that I'm not doing is going out to eat at restaurants. Like that's not going to happen anymore. That's a big deal for Americans, Not, and it's funny because I never really loved it. I always felt overstuffed when I was eating out at restaurants. And I don't suspect that it was because the food was high in caloric content, because I can eat gigantic meals with an active brain, but it was because my digestion wouldn't work when I was stimulated like that. So, these are the interesting things of where you are going to be doing some things that are kind of perverse and alienating. And how do you explain this to regular people? I'm not going out to dinner anymore. But you can also kind of test the waters with your toes to see, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And I hear you on not having a lot of third lines. It's all unconscious for me. So I'm just like, this is just how it's gonna be. Like I'm not even, I have surrendered to my third line designness.
Do you have third lines on your personality side?
Good question. I was just thinking that actually, and I was thinking in my head, how is it that I don't know this? And the answer is my Jupiter.
Okay.
My Jupiter is the only planet that, and it's in 31.3. So it's in the alpha channel.
But it's in
Um,
a defined center.
it is in a defined
Yeah,
center. Yeah.
in the throat.
Yeah. So that is that. And but yeah, on the other side, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 5 threes, including both my sun and earth for design. So I have a good
What's
amount.
your what's your most abundant number? Number one? Line one. Sorry to make everyone wait while on your toes. What's the word
I
for
think
like
it's
the
one. I think it's
suspension?
one. Yeah, I think it's one. I think
The
it's one.
suspense. There we go. That is the suspense of waiting for Sarah to count all
It's
the
one.
numbers.
It's one, but it's one by a hair because I have 6 ones, I have 5 threes, and then everything else is less than that. Um, so yeah. However, okay, enough of me doing this right now. Anyway, has there been anything happening to you this week that was particularly interesting as far as your experiment is concerned?
Indeed, it's funny because last week when you asked, I was like, I have no idea what day it is. Like, I'm in the void. Don't ask me anything. But I noticed a lot of things happened this past week, so I have more to share. One of which is Sarah invited me to help her with her curly hair journey, and we experienced rather a lot of projector success on this. It's like super trivial and mundane, but
Not to me.
it's fun as girls. We like our hair. But I was called out. So I feel like I have a lot of calling out. I don't have that many twos. I think I have four twos. Or yeah, four twos in my design, but I get called out to which propels my investigative nature. It's not like I get called out and like I'm naturally talented at things. I get called out and then the investigative pool kicks in because I'm a 5-1, so my body is more so investigative. And then I'll go into like deep research mode. So several years ago, my sister was like, "Hey, you probably have wavy hair." And I'm just like, "What, me? I didn't know this was a thing." And then I like went into the internet and did a lot of research, a lot of investigating into what it means to have curly or wavy hair and how to take care of it and how to fix it and how to troubleshoot and do all the things. And I've just like been doing it myself. And then here Sarah comes along and invites me to guide her on her journey and give her advice. And so it's been really fun to get to share to be the heretical person and share the investigation that has since happened. So thank you, Sarah. But I've also received two other invitations this past week. One of which was to read tarot cards at a dinner party, which is a whole conversation that I want to get into, like what tarot has to do with human design. And another one was helping my sister with her knitting. So yeah, it's been like a busy week in terms of mundane, trivial invitations, which is also a whole conversation in and of itself. Because and I'm guessing Sarah too, as an undefined G, we really like big invitations because it helps us figure out directions in life. Like the little invitations, people say in the Facebook groups that like we're receiving invitations all the time. Just like open your eyes and you're gonna see them. And a lot of those invitations are just like ridiculous and you don't give a rat's ass about them and they have nothing to do with you or your purpose, especially as a right mind with what gets pulled out of you. Like the things that I get invited to research for other people because they don't want to do the work and research things themselves. Like I really don't care. Yesterday was Monday, which was the caucus election thing. My mother started asking me all these questions. I'm just like, no, I'm like, I'm not going to do the investigative labor for you if you because she's an immigrant, she's not native born here, but she has done the naturalization process, so she's a citizen. But you only learn so much in that process. You don't like learn everything there is to know about the election process. So she was asking me questions like, what's this mean? What's that mean? What is this? What's that? I'm just like, I don't know. I learned it in high school, but I don't remember, and I'm not going to do the work right now, even though you're inviting me. Like, I'm not going to do the work right now to figure it out for you. Um, but anyways, yeah, lots of different tangents we can go down right now, Sarah. So feel free to pick a path.
And there were so many, you're right. I was like, oh my God, there's so many things I want to say here. Oh God, what was I gonna say? Okay, so you mentioned my hair. You mentioned your sister.
Tarot.
Oh, tarot. That was one thing that I definitely want to go down that path, but there was something
But
else.
there's also like, what does the proper invitation mean in
Yeah.
terms of like big ones or little ones? Like being invited to do tarot at the dinner party, I was recognized and invited, but my spleen wasn't jumping up and down with joy. I was like, I guess fine, if you really want me to, I'll do it for you. But
Yeah.
I was not, I didn't feel super successful. Whereas with Sarah, like I did feel joy and excitement at guiding her. I have 16.5, which is the Grinch, as my personality Earth, which needs to be called out. Um, it's the refusal to share an enthusiasm. And so there is like a calling out nature to that gate, just like I can't cultivate my own joy and happiness. So someone else has to invite me to pull it out. And like I don't get to pick and choose what excites my body. So it's weird. It's not a fun game, but
Funny
that's another tangent.
my other dear friend has that gate too, and I'm just like, y'all, like let me get let me just I know it well. I was also gonna say, just this is a little tiny tidbit, but gosh, do I love left perspective personalities. The focused perspective is just so nice because my brain does not work like that. And as a line three, basically I'm going off of vibes a lot. Like I make an error, and instead of being like, well, this is the recipe, and so this is where I went wrong in the recipe, I'm like, let's just go off of vibes and see if we can do it again, and this time the right way. And the second time is invariably not correct either. And then the third time is another not correct vibe thing where I'm just like going off of the vibe, the energy, and I'm never actually following any recipe, and I'm never hitting the ultimate goal of the three, which is like this experimentation to learn what is accurate. So I feel like Lora helped guide me in that process because I've been doing this. First of all, I just have a really difficult relationship with my hair, and it has gotten harder as I've gotten older, and my hair has gotten curlier as I've gotten older. And so I just feel like a freaking mouse half the time, and I'm just grateful that I was able to do this. Like there's still some things that need to be perfected, but I got a really general understanding of like the importance of these specific steps. Right. And this is also where
Water. If you're wondering, if you have wavy hair and you're wondering what's so important, water. Water is your friend.
water is a very important thing. Water is very important. Um, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that you would just never know if you're like me and you've just been going off of vibes and watching random videos on people who don't have the same texture of your as you of hair at all. So it's like, I'm just gonna follow this girl because she has curls. Yeah, but she doesn't have fine curls. Like there's all kinds of it's as nuanced and individuated your hair as the rest of your body graph. so so yes, deeply appreciate it. Not gonna say that I'm never gonna FaceTime you again when I'm doing my hair because I don't think that's true. I think I'm probably gonna need a few more whatevers, but it's just nice to be around someone who has that focused perspective when you don't. And this is also just speaks to, we're all right and left. Not all of us, some of us are all left and some of us are all right. But there's a way to get the leftness and the rightness to really complement and like help each other out. So it's
Well, I
nice.
think they need each other. I think there's moments where Raha said, like, the left is going to need the right in the future, and like the right needs the left right now because we're just lost. Like, we're the wizards in the Muggle world. We need the Muggles to hold the Muggle world together. But I wonder how much of it is leftness and rightness, and how much of it is abstraction versus logic. Like, the logic in me, which is pretty darn heavy, is going to go through the pattern and see what works and what doesn't work and know what the steps are in the process, whereas the abstract is just like, I'm gonna throw spaghetti at the wall and see what happens. And
Oh,
next time I'm gonna make lasagna instead of spaghetti, and then the time after that I'm gonna make soup. So it's just like throwing chaos to the winds and not that having that plan. So it's interesting being receptive with a focused view and being logical, like being the perfect combination of attributes to help Sarah, basically.
you are definitely on my fractal, no question about it. But yeah, no, I mean it's definitely interesting to just see the, like you said, what Ra said of the like hand in hand nature, but also I'm all abstract. I mean, what the hell? I mean, truly, I mean, I'm thinking about every time I've ever cooked, never ever followed a recipe. I would rather
Oh,
die.
I don't like recipes. I just put things together. But I'm
Okay.
also a combination of abstract and logical, but I really don't like recipes. For bread, I do math. Like every time I'm not going to follow a recipe, I'm just going to do more math every time I make bread. But if I'm going to make something else like a cake, I just do what feels right. Like sometimes I'm like, "Oh no, today I want to use 5 eggs instead of 4 eggs." Does it affect the chemistry of the cake? You bet. But that's just what my feelings want to do in terms of baking a cake in the moment. So yeah, I'm also not very strategic when it comes to
Well,
cooking.
I'm not doing any math, let's just say, and I'm literally going off vibes. And sometimes the things that I make taste really good, but I will never ever be able to recreate them. That's for sure. They're never going to be recreated.
You don't have gate 48. I have 48, and Raha said with 48, never try to do the same thing twice. I'm pretty sure somewhere there's a quote about it, but about like if you're gonna cook something, you know, don't try to do the same thing. I don't know why,
I don't know
but
why.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, because 48 is a mirror to 36, whereas 36 is about new experience, 48 is about new experiments. So
That
it's
makes sense.
experimental, 48 is experimental, and 36 is experiential. So the also just to say, I have 48 as my design rising degree, but I still
Oh,
today
I didn't know
don't
that.
didn't
Like,
understand. Wait, what did you
I
say?
did know that. I just forgot it.
Okay,
Go
no.
ahead. Sorry.
To this day, do not understand um why or how the rising sign has gotten left out of human design, because Rod does acknowledge that he has eighth house planets. So he what?
This
Go
is interesting. I want to say something. Well, it goes back to what I said earlier about like no one recognizes me for my opinions. My design rising is in gate 17, which you have, which is interesting because we have like that
Mhm.
symmetry. I have 48 and it's your rising, and you have 17 and it's my rising. But I very rarely get invited for my logical opinions. Or I feel like I get even invited even less for my stories, except for you. Like you're the only person that pulls stories out of me. No one wants to hear my stories. But yeah, I notice it in other people, but I feel like it gets so rarely pulled out of me. I don't know.
Well, and that's where you have to ask yourself, why has the rising sign been left out of human design consideration, just discourse, generally speaking, especially when Ra has discussed his eighth house. I mean, I heard him say, I have eighth house, whatever, whatever. And I'm just like, okay, well, the eighth house is based on where your rising sign is. And so, what does that all mean? So if anyone knows that's listening to this, please let me know.
Well, if
And
you think about it logically, as my brain does, most of the planets, like 90, not 90, 70% of our neutrinos come from the sun, and therefore also the Earth as its polar force. Uh, 30% the other 30% comes from Jupiter and the other stars, which, so all the planets that we have in our design are reflections of the sun's light. So they're kind of like the distilled sunlight force getting expressed, the neutrinos that come from the sun to those planets, then to us, apart from Jupiter, because Jupiter's special. I think Jupiter provides like 3% of our neutrinos or 7%. I don't know which one of those two numbers. But the nodes are points in space. The nodes that we had this conversation recently, the nodes are windows, they're portals, but there is no matter there to interact with the matter of the neutrinos. And so it's more so the star's energy, that neutrino energy that comes in from farther out of our solar system that comes to us through the portal of the nodes to reach us. And so if you look at what the ascendant is, it's also a calculated point based on the Earth's position at the time of your birth. It's one of those portals. However, like the nodes, they do get credit in our design. Like they have gates that get activated and affect our channels and our definition. But with a different filter, like they get interpreted slightly differently in their nuanced, detailed form. I mean, they do get qualification towards like whether you have a channel defined or not, like that channel is a part of you, but it's also how you see being that window. And so, yeah, it is interesting to think about, but logically, in the sense that, like, if we're putting things together, well, the nodes are that portal for the stars. So, what would the ascendant be a portal for? What is filtering through that particular doorway to get to us is food for thought. Again, if you know, feel free to share, but
yeah, no, it is truly food
those
for
are my
thought
logical
because
sense.
yeah, it's like more that is very logical. And it's also I understand that there's no there's no matter, there's nothing that the neutrinos aren't coming from the ascendant. So it makes sense that it's not considered in the when we're doing the chart configuration, that the ascendant degree isn't something that's filled out. but I feel like it should be mentioned, and there should be some kind of explanation for what it means to you, because maybe it has more of a special meaning to you, which I've always felt like a Scorpio rising. It's not even a question. Like, that was something that made so much sense to me when my Pisces sun, well, then again, my Pisces sun is in gate 36, which is the darkening of the light. But I just know that a lot of people have identified really strongly with their ascendant. And beyond that, like, I've always noticed that Leo risings have like a similar vibe. So it's just hard for me to completely throw out the ascendant without just hearing if Ra was alive, what his explanation on it would be. And I'm sure he talked to somebody about it, like Alok, who was an astrologer before he was into human design, would probably have asked that question to him. And so he probably knows. But anyway, neither here nor there. Just another random thought that has been, kind of bugging me for a while. So
It's
let's move on to, or wait, did you want to say
well
something?
similar, like a parallel conversation then is tarot, because astrology is like one of the significant branches of how a human design chart is calculated, along with like the Hindu Brahma chakra system and the Kabbalah and quantum physics. And yet tarot got discluded. And Ra talked about that in cosmology for a brief 2 seconds. I think he said like at some point down the line, tarot like veered down a different path and it changed. And like the original version sort of correlated more with human design, but something happened and it's not a part of the system for whatever reason. Um, but that doesn't necessarily discount its validity in and of itself, or discount its not self fodder for the not self mind, which is kind of probably the path we're going to take right now. But again, like with this whole Kabbalah, like who studies Kabbalah? Like I feel like it's so rare for like a bunch of people know astrology, a bunch of people know chakras, but who actually knows the Kabbalah and its value and how much like we tend to pick up as astrologers, Sarah and I tend to pick apart the astrological foundation of human design, like wondering why the ascendant isn't included. And I wonder who out there knows so much Kabbalistic wisdom to say, like, look at how wrong human design is, because it's very much veered off from the original Kabbalah, or not, or maybe it's super accurate. Who knows? Like, there's obviously 9 chakra centers compared to the original 7, and that has been discussed far and wide, as to like why we have those, which is because we're 9 centered beings for like the post 1781 mutation of projectors becoming into existence. But yeah, tarot. Sorry, that was just like a very awkward introduction to changing the subject.
Well, no, I mean, I was like, damn it, now I have to become a Kabbalistic scholar because because I need to know all of the things. And I did study a little bit of it, but I didn't get that far into it. But I do know, right, I have the Aleister Crowley tarot deck, which I don't use anymore, but in the book that accompanies it, it goes through how all of the cards are related to the Kabbalah, and or yeah, Kabbalah, however you pronounce it.
I don't
Sorry.
know how to pronounce it. I'm not a Kabbalistic scholar, so don't quote me.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about. Just coming out of our right minds, whatever is coming out. But yeah, I mean, so just to put my 2 cents in here before you talk about your 2 cents more, your 50 cents, my 30 cents. There was a relatively popular tarot reader on Instagram who was like really in depth. He
Oh
was
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Go for
very
it. Yeah.
scholarly, very scholarly. I followed him. He felt like one of the only scholarly tarot Instagram accounts that was also relevant. So maybe there's other ones out there, but they just haven't made it to relevance. And he recently basically just disowned, and there's a better word than that. I can't think of it right now.
Announced.
Denounced. There you go. Thank you. Um, the tarot and converted back to Catholicism and has his whole reasoning for it. And it left me feeling some type of way.
Well, It's I followed him too, and it's funny because you shared his post with me. I was scrolling on Instagram one day and I saw like his scroll passed by me. I was like, what happened to me? And I'm just like, ignore, like I'm not gonna listen to this. And then Sarah brought it to my attention, like, oh look what happened. He used to be really religious. His name was Taro Exeget, I think is I
Yeah,
don't has he changed his name? I don't think so. I think he's maintained his tarot name, which is a bit weird. But
all very new.
he used to be very religious. I think like he studied to be a priest or like some sort of religious figure before he got into tarot. Um, but
Mhm.
that's, I mean, separate but also relevant. Like that, I saw recently in the Facebook group, one of them, someone posted about religion, like being Christian and doing human design and how that looks. And Diana Vin responded saying like some people are just more mechanically aligned to religion. And that's true. Like the second line, second color, everything to do with two is religious.
Yeah.
Line one, this is, I think, in Colors of Motivation. It might be called Colors of Consciousness. I don't remember, but it was a series of talks that Rod did a while back on motivation, and he talked about fear being like institutional. Like when you look at fear, it's a very collective energy of just like, let's build society so that society can survive. And then when it comes to hope, it's about like, let's build society in a religious way. Let's maintain hope for everyone. Let's organize everyone's mental capacity in this religious standpoint. I'm like very much poorly played, not plagiarizing, but paraphrasing. It is plagiarizing, but poorly paraphrasing what Ross said. I can't remember the details, but he described both color one and color two as having this like big, broad vast societal influence, and one being about more of the infrastructure of society, and two being about religion. So color two, also gate 56, which you and I have, it's built to seek. I have 56.2, which is the second line, the religious line. Like all line twos are spiritual, and that doesn't necessarily mean religious, but it means like that they're looking for something. They're waiting to be called out. And I think any religious experience is usually one in which you're called out by some higher power, which, you know, might just be consciousness and how your vehicle is experiencing consciousness, but you're going to label, oh, it's a higher power that's calling me out, and like having an encounter of some sort with something to create that sort of experience in which you say, oh, I'm going to change what I'm doing because God is calling me, or this is calling me, or that's calling me, whatever it is. I don't know. I feel like I did not well phrase my thoughts. I have more thoughts, but they haven't fully formed in my noggin yet to be well expressed. But there is something to say there in
Oh yeah.
terms of line two, color two, and religion. But tarot, going back to like tarot as a system, and the way people use it is trying to bypass strategy and authority to figure out what to do so that you can initiate. And that is probably not the best way to use tarot, but there are some people out there who do use tarot as a really nice resource for understanding themes, like processing what's happening, processing what the lesson to be learned is given a situation, figuring out what it is you should glean from a situation or glean from a failure of some sort or whatever it is, as like a spiritual tool rather than a forecasting tool to figure out what to do, as we so often like to do. However, at the same time, it's fascinating because we have the nodes in gates 51 and 57, which is part of the incarnation cross of the Clarion.
Mhm.
And I have had experience with very accomplished tarot readers who could predict my future. And they did. And like they were able to use that intuitive clarity of gate 57 and initiate me into the 51 of saying this is what's going to happen, and then it did. And the tarot cards were just their method of reading the pattern, as I like to call it, reading the future. So like that it was true. It happened. It's not like I did anything, but what they said unfolded pretty darn accurately in terms of what the cards inform them, or how the cards inform them. And so I don't think we should necessarily be constantly seeking advice from the tarot cards on what to do, because that just feeds the mind into thinking it has some way over existence, which human design says, like, no, we have no choice, which is a whole other topic, which maybe we'll elaborate more on another day because it's a pretty darn heavy topic, determinism. But yeah, tarot.
Yeah, the heaviest of topics, if you will. But no, I mean, it's everything that you just said. I had kind of a come to Jesus, and I'm sorry, it's such a bad.
Exactly what, right? It's like you don't go seeking for Jesus, but Jesus comes to you. Same with like any sort of
To say he
religious
had
experience.
the guy who's got the Instagram had a come to Jesus moment. But the problem that I had with it, the thing that rubbed me the wrong way was that he was like, this is a sin against God because it's written in the Bible. And I was just like, dogma, seven-centered dogma. I was like, that is seven-centered dogma to me. And so I unfollowed him and I was like, this is trash. Like I was just like trash, trash, garbage. If you have a relationship with God, a higher power, whatever, but as soon as the fear of like you're going to hell creeps in, I'm like, get this away from me. Y'all are insane. And just to speak to the two, my mom's a 2-4, and she got really into the Baptist religion. And I was always there, like with my squinty eyes, like, I don't really trust these people. So it's been, yeah, I can see where the two, it is so related to the like to theism and really not being able to prove the existence or the lack thereof existence of God. Um, so yeah, all of that. And then as far as my, this past year, I was really in the not self. Laura knows I was freaking I was on the run and
We
then
all are. It's not just you, we all are.
yeah, but I was activated, making decision after decision from the not self. My not self trauma was triggered AF, and I was just pulling all kinds of tarot cards all over the place, trying to get some kind of answers to my questions and, and guidance on what should I do. And it's like, okay, if we just put this whole situation in the garbage and labeled it something, it would be not self. So forget the cards, they don't matter because you're just looking at an entirely not self situation from soup to nuts. So in those cases, I'm like, it's the same thing with people who come for astrology readings, which is why I also got kind of just sick of astrology readings. People are coming to get information that they wanted to hear. They weren't coming to get information about themselves that was going to change their life, right? And so, very similar things happen with human design. People get readings, they're like reading junkies, and they just go from person to person getting readings, and it just collects dust in a pile, and they never change anything about themselves, or not even change. They never let anything actually saturate them to the point where they're able to create a new conscious awareness around it. So it's like, I hear what you're saying about the person who's using tarot. Maybe they're splenic, right? They have an intuitive sensibility to be able to see the pattern and call it out. And they're using this particular form of divination to speak to the pattern. And that is one thing. And then there's the people who are just like flipping cards on Etsy, telling you that if you do this specific spell, then you'll get the love of your life back, is probably a trauma bond. Like that's a different situation entirely, right?
Yeah. Um, to pedal back a few pegs, steps, whatever the appropriate analogy is, please enjoy my idioms. English is my second language, and as a consequence of that, I've never learned proper English idioms because I was raised in a household that doesn't use English idioms. And I guess they weren't shared enough in school, so I like to come up with my own, and they're probably really wrong and inaccurate. But
I have
to
enough.
pedal back,
Sorry, I just want to say I have enough idioms for us both, so it's fine. Go ahead.
well, I listen to these and like, oh, I never heard that one. I never heard that one. That one's good. Do I remember them correctly? No. So I make up
I'm
my
gonna
own.
be such an annoying old lady when I'm just all full of idioms and everyone's like, that's from literally 1990, Sarah. And I'll be like, yeah, it is. Okay, go
That's
ahead.
not that long ago. I was thinking like idioms from like the 50s. But anyways,
It might be.
cosmology. So I feel like I'm gonna drop out with a lot of these programs in human design that I started listening to and never completed. I got really into cosmology for year one, and then, or semester one, year one, I don't know which it is, but I started the second phase and then I didn't continue. And I'm sad that I didn't, but whatever. Maybe one day I will, maybe one day I won't. Gotta love deaf gates. But cosmology's year two or semester two, whatever it is about the mystical way, which is a series of gates and channels in the design which lead to religious experiences. And the first one of that is 1949. And then, well, I feel like there's some that are like actually part of the mystical way and some that are like dotted lines, mystical way. They're there, but they're not necessarily like a concrete foundational part of it. The next one of which is 3740, 5120, 5121. What's that? 25. 5125 is definitely one. And what's the last one? I don't remember. See, I don't know. I didn't listen to the whole course, so I don't know the answer.
Sorry,
Huh?
so I was like, I feel like it's 6124, but I could be wrong.
No, it's something from the G to the throat, but I
Okay.
don't know which one. Oh, maybe it's 1020. It could be 1020 individual. Anyways, the basis of like the foundational way, the mystical way is tribal of the needs and wants of society as a tribe and the revolution that happens to maintain those principles. Gate 49 is all about the principles that we have. And so the root of the mystical journey is tribal, but then it also becomes individual. So it's not just like a individual journey, but a tribal journey. And then the I feel like if you just think about this is like not tarot, it's not human design, it's religion, but religion is very collective. It's beliefs that we all decidedly agree to exist and be true as a collective. That probably was first individual, then became tribal, then took over into a collective thing. And so it's interesting to look at collective beliefs as collective people. Sarah and I are wholesomely collective. And so we're here to share, we're here to look at collective truths or collective ideas and see which ones are valid and not, and to share our own with the collective. But yeah, religion is a very collective experience. And so I he gave you the ick, right? Him being dogmatic and saying like tarot is a sin and you have to convert. That for you is an ick. But 2/4s are missionaries. Once they get called out, then it becomes their profile, their purpose, their role in life to be the missionary and convert others, whether it's religion or a diet or a fad or any sort of belief system or anything else. So it's like those people are being correct. I'm not saying this guy is a 2/4, but like the 2/4s are correct to go into their network and to be the missionaries of their conversion for the rest of society. So we can't say that they're wrong in doing that, regardless of what we believe in. Um, Even if it's not correct for us to be called out as a consequence of their going out and being missionaries, but it's just like that's part of the human experience, which is, if we're going to look at the broader perspective, the program is here to experience all the different variations of what it means to be us. So to be a 1/3 or to be a 5/1 or to be a 2/4. And part of that is the missionaries out there with their missions going out and telling everyone that they're wrong and that they themselves are right.
Yeah, I get that because again, my mom was a 2/4. And so it took a lot and it's still taking a lot to, part of this is just being triggered by by religion in general and religious fanaticism,
Yeah.
which is what I would call it. And just to say, this whole world is in the upside down. Everyone's in transference. Like he may or may not be correct for the program. I mean, he is correct for the program, but if he's actually being correct or not, I don't think that. I don't think that, but not just because I think I could say that anyone's not being correct for who it is that they truly are, because 99.999% of people are not self. So, yes, correct for the program. For me, is it correct for him? Obviously, I'm not the one to say because I don't know what his chart is, yada, yada. But I will be so bold to assume that he is in transference. Um,
Maybe his whole tarot journey was one of transference.
So true. So true. So, well, and that's the other thing, because my whole one thing, let's just speak to transference. Actually, this is a great opportunity. Something that I
Our
realized,
favorite topic here.
my favorite topic, because it's so relevant, but especially projectors, but it can be it's generators too, especially on the personality side. Your whole life is saturated and built in your transference. I mean, by and large. Your entire life is saturated and built by your transference because you've been living in it for so long. And so you've made all of your decisions from it. And so your decisions have been made and they've built the life that you have out of likely transference. And so it's like, I had this realization today, right? It's like where I am right now as I'm deconditioning, you're the thing that you're inside of, the frequency and the vibration of what you're inside of in your life has been created from transference, likely. And so it's why this takes so much time because it's correct decision after correct decision made from the right motivation that eventually will get you into a life that actually looks like what is correct for who it is that you really are, not your homogenized not self. And you can do what I did, which is like throwing everything out your whole life and just being like, well, this thing's not working anymore. Um, but that's not realistic for most people. Like all that you can really do is just make a correct decision after a correct decision and slowly make your way towards the correct trajectory with the decisions that you're making. And it just dawned on me, like thinking about the fact that I'm an innocence transference. I mean, my whole life has been made by my innocence transference. And so it's hard to separate the just the fact of the matter that I'm inside of this pool of innocence from the ability, the true coherent ability I have to make decisions based on desire. But it's like I'm in a pool of innocence still. It's getting drained slowly, I think. But it's like a saturation. And I think about it like that, especially with everyone. And when I see people who are innocence motivation, but they're transferred to desire, I can see how they're in a pool of desire. And like they can start to say, oh, like, I've been doing human design for 5 years or whatever. It's like the aquarium that you're inside of is made up of your desire, like your not self desire. So, it takes a while to empty out the aquarium, drain it, add some new freaking fish and algae and all kinds of stuff, little pebbles at the bottom, make it a new aquarium that's made of a different thing that you can saturate your life in. So this is again where the 14% a year cellular deconditioning thing is so relevant. But yeah, I was just another rant about because I said last week that we're all in transference, and I really truly mean it that until you've hit I guess you could say it's like the teeter-totter flips in the other direction after you've made enough correct decisions as yourself, like, and then you're like moving more towards 75% of self instead of like before you were at like 40% self, really still living within your own innocence, motivation, living in the living in the innocence based decision world that you created. So at least for me, it's innocence, and for Laura too. But for everyone, it's different, depending on what your transference is.
But I have a detailed, focused, specific, oriented question in response to that is like, yes, our transference is innocence. However, our trajectory is to go from the strategic leader to the receptive follower. And for us, when we are not self, as right-minded beings, we are strategic. And so that leadership quality of the strategic third color is incorrect for us, right? Logically. So that means like we have three potentials for non-self innocence. Well, fourth color, sorry, you got all of them. You can transfer everywhere, unfortunately. But for the rest, our innocence, not self, can be innocence observed or innocence observer, or it can be the leader of the desire. because we're going from the strategic leader. Being strategic in desire is also wrong. We're receptive in desire, right? Does that
Well,
make sense?
yeah, it does. I mean, I think so. If I understood what you said correctly. I mean, I think there's yeah, being strategic in our not self's desire, of course, is not right. Like, and the bottom line that I keep thinking of just with being receptive in general is the concept of, and also, this is the thing, a lock, who I got my reading from, and I talked about this on a past podcast, that there's a multivalent um way to look at this because of course, I'm supposed to be pulling desire out of other people. Supposed to be, I'm supposed to be pulling desire out of other people as a receptive personality, but that's not necessarily the only way that desire motivation works as a receptive person. It's also the feeling of being locked into something. So if we're in desire, that's the homogenized version of desire and being strategic about it, that's not correct. But I don't think that desire is really fully understood properly because everybody that is that has that we could define as being desiring things has been doing it in their not self. So it's like when we're in that homogenized version of desire because we're being strategic, then of course it's not right. But it's like when we're locked in to something and we unintentionally begin to lead something because we're locked into it without the intention of leading, but just because that's the beginning of our trajectory is leading to following, then that's when it becomes correct. So I don't know if that answers anything, but there is something to be said about the trajectory that it's not guaranteed to you. You may never get on it, period, ever. And it does start at one place and end in another. And um, and so I feel like the concept of environment and external variable on the personality side is still not fully understood by me because that's kind of like the last thing that locks in. It's like you have to be locked into your motivation before you can even get into your trajectory. That's what
And
Ross,
your trajectory of your view or your trajectory of your motivation?
the trajectory of leader to follower.
Yeah.
Sorry, that probably wasn't
No,
clear.
it's okay. I missed the specific word I was listening for. And so I'm just like, wait, what? Oh,
So
yeah.
that's the leader to follower isn't even it's like a non-starter until we're locked into our correct motivation. And locked in I'm using is not necessarily like locked in is actually what we're supposed to be as desire motivation folks. Um so not dropouts, right? Like that's what I was listening to his rave psychology about the three and he was just talking about how much the transferred three is a dropout, and how much the transferred six is trying to lead all over the place, but they're not doing it, it's not correct, but um neither here nor there. The other thing that I learned actually while we're on the subject of transference is that with people who have fear, or I'm sorry, need motivation, there's two aspects of the way that you can see them in transference into fear. There's the people who are very clearly fearful. So they're like, you can tell that they're afraid and they're holding themselves back because of the fear. And then there's people that have an extreme bravado because they're trying to overcompensate for the fear. So it was just interesting to me because I have people of all of the different motivations in my life. But it's interesting to me to think about that because I know of two people both having need motivation, both being transferred to fear. One is far more like insular and like timid, and the other one acts like a total egomaniac. And I was like, oh, okay. So like how does that work? And I'm starting to, it's easier to see in other people, you know,
Yeah,
just
especially as projectors.
yeah, especially as projectors. And I like every time I'm doing any type of TikTok or video or whatever, I'm always like, I'm still like 50% in not self land. So take what you will, you know, take the meat and leave the bone behind. That's my new saying for like just please don't take everything that I say, all of it seriously, because I'm still partially ruled by my not self. So
Well,
you know,
so is everyone else. So, they're
was
not
every-
going to
I
actually
know.
take what you say because it'll lead them to inappropriate decisions. I wanted to say in response to that, I thought color four transferred to all the colors.
So color four does transfer to all the actually this is Raw talks about this and I freaking wasn't listening to this part because he just talked like he started talking about it, but he wasn't talking about it like he was talking about it. We were talking about determination on the design side. Like it wasn't as slippery, it seemed like, even though it does transfer, but it seems like the place it transfers to all the colors when it's being correct. When it's being incorrect, it goes to one. So
Maybe for the design side, but for personality, there is a series where he went through all the motivations for each line.
mm,
And so it wasn't full color chains, but it had a specific name. And I remember each time he came to color four, he would talk about how it would transfer everywhere
yeah.
as incorrect transference. I don't know.
Hmm. I'm listening.
I haven't listened to color chains and ripe psychology, so I
Well,
don't
that's
know.
what I'm listening to, and he isn't really hammering in the point about it transferring everywhere because I fully remember it in PHS just because I was so concerned about my
Yeah.
four color determination. So I don't know. More to come. I can't answer any questions on that right now. I don't want to, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I have a projector story about the locked in nature of desire, if you want me to share.
Yes.
Or being a dropout rather, not being locked in. So I don't remember how much I've shared before here about my massage therapy journey. I know Sarah knows, but I don't remember if I talked about it on the podcast. Um, Back in 2019, so early in my deconditioning process, I wanted to initiate and learn a specific healing modality, which required a previous certification to be able to legally touch people, so a medical degree of some sort, a medical license, or for me, the options were like doing acupuncture school or massage therapy school. And as I was in the beginning stages of my deconditioning journey, I decided to do nothing and wait. Lo and behold, I was invited by my friend, which begs the question, like, was I accurately, correctly invited to do it? Because she knew I was a projector and she's a generator. And she did a lot of the work of driving me to school because I don't drive, figuring out all the strategic stuff, keeping us organized, like being strategic, being on top of things. So I was just kind of like a passenger princess in that whole process and didn't do much. Um, but like, was it even correct for me to say yes in the beginning? Who knows? COVID happened, school got postponed, school got put online. The application board had a bunch of issues. My school got discredited. Like so much stuff happened. And like again, going back to the whole like I don't have a lot of third lines. I am not built for trial and error and resiliency. And I ended up quote unquote giving up or dropping out, like not being locked in because I lost the personal motivation and desire to continue. And it was the past winter, I don't know, October, November, December, where like I finally got my application results in, which like they denied it for the false reasoning that I didn't send proof of my like because my education was um faulty or invalid. I had to prove that I went to school and learned what I did. So I had to send the board all of my educational materials online, and I did that. And then they said I never sent it in. And I emailed them back several times saying, no, actually, I did send them in. And I never heard back from them. And part of me just like, I don't have the projector strength to keep on going. Like it has been so draining. And in terms of like my own mental mind chatter, like I don't necessarily want to do this thing anymore because I feel like as a splenic person, I'm no longer that person that I was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And so, yeah, it's here's the theme of being locked in or being a dropout. Having that desire motivation as the barometer of whether something is continuously correct or not. As I was going to school, I was locked in. It was easy to have the energy to do the things and get things done. But as soon as everything started to crumble, the energy wasn't there anymore. I wasn't locked in anymore. I became just like the observer watching what was happening without having skin in the game, not caring about the consequences, just like watching what happens. And I feel like somewhere along the journey, it became incorrect. Maybe it was correct in the beginning, or maybe it wasn't correct in the beginning. Who knows? Who's to say? It hasn't resulted in success. It's resulted in me having much more awareness of my body, being able to understand myself as I dance more. It's like it's helped my dancing incredibly. But has it brought success? No, probably not. So I don't know. It's just a personal story of trying to decipher what desire might look like in
Yeah.
practical terms. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that is a good example. And it's interesting because it's like you could really just live from your mind your whole life. You know, you really just could live from your mind your whole life and make decisions, and some would go okay and some would not go well. And like it would just be repeating patterns over and over again and whatever. Because, I was thinking about what you were saying. This is funny. My dad wrote my entry like application letter to the college that I went to. I just did not have the energy for it. And I don't really think I cared about going to college, but he wanted to cart my ass off to college because I was a really bad kid. I was smart. I mean, I was in all honors classes. I had above a 4.0. Like, it was not a bad kid in terms of grades, bad kid in terms of partying and all that stuff. And, second I went to college, shit went left. Like I did not belong there. I didn't belong dorming with other people as a projector, nothing against the other people. It just my aura does not belong with someone else's aura in that close kind of container because I get so conditioned that I lose myself entirely. And there's a lot of things that went totally wrong, and by the end of it, I forced myself to get a double major in English and economics, and I got the degree and whatever. Took me an extra year, but it was completely incorrect for me. There's nothing about that that was right. Just because I got the degree does not mean that it was right. From the beginning to the end, it was wrong. And it just, I never felt locked in to English or to economics. I felt locked in at moments to English as far as just like my interest. My interest for English was there. My interest for English lit was there, but I would have been just as well off taking one course a semester and like just learning in that way. But this is going to kind of harken back to the just concept of no choice, because it's like, well, until we get locked in, we're not going to get locked in. And how do we get locked into things that aren't correct for us until we find the thing that is correct for us to get locked into? And so, what I've just been waiting around until human design came along was all of the wrong decisions correct in order to get me to where I am now. Where is it? Where's the answer as far as the lock-in? One thing I will say is I know when something is wrong, when I make a decision, feel very desirous and locked into it, but I don't wait out my emotional authority to see. And then slowly over time, I start to get like locked out. You could say I start to get um more and more distant, more and more observerish. So it's like following the emotional authority is so key to get locked into things that are correct for you, for me, right? For Laura
Well,
would
it's
be
worth saying that your particular emotional authority comes from the channel 4130, which gate 30 in the emotional center is the gate of desire. Like its whole thing is about desires. Like there's a difference in that desire and the desire of motivation. So perhaps like, yeah, the emotional lock was there, but it wasn't the correct motivation lock.
Right, right. Well, yeah, and it is different. It is different. The desire from the motivation desire and desire as we understand it from the 3041 are different things. And it all gets very complicated having an open G center. All very complicated. So it's not to say that I really have any idea, but I do, like with this podcast, I feel more locked in than I felt when we were doing it the first time with Steffi and the stuff that we're doing. I've had to do the bonds made and broken thing with everyone. I mean, everyone. Like, there's nobody that's free. My therapist even gets it. And so it's like I've had to do some of that stuff to get locked in, but eventually it's like, okay, I'm locked into these things. Um, and when I start to drift away, I'm like, okay, what's not correct for me here? Like, what is it that's not correct for me here? And as it turns out, last time I think what was not correct for me was the strategicness of it. I had made up all kinds of mental reasons why it wasn't correct because I was thinking, I was like, I'm not 1156, unconscious. I was like going in these weird tangents. I was also in super not self land because of other things. But, and even with me and Steffi, we started out and I was being a generator, and I had to like stop. I had to slowly over time stop myself from trying to be a generator because I could not do it all in one fail swoop. I was not capable. I didn't have anything that was capable of doing that. It's not easy when you've been living your whole life like a generator, thinking in specific patterned ways. So, I don't feel like I'm fully, you know, I know I'm not locked in on my trajectory just yet, but I sense again that the teeter totter, the whatever they're called, it's not a teeter totter.
Well, I could think it's called a tipping point, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. The tipping point is getting closer, but it's not here yet. So
Or
that is,
seesaw. I think it has the name of a teeter-totter too, but it's a seesaw.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Or both. Um, your college days reminded me of my college days, which also were in my dad didn't write my entry for me, which is funny. I like that. That's really cute. But uh whether my college journey was correct is a whole other thing, but the theme that I'm gonna bring here is that things don't have to be 100% correct. Like little things can be correct and other things can be incorrect, and it can be a soup of different things. So in college, I also got a degree that I do not use. I don't like remember anything that I learned. And it was just like a whole undefined G mess of just like not being able to pick a degree because I had no idea who I was or what I wanted to focus on. And I just embraced the degree of whoever, the identity of whoever I was with. But I had a lot of opportunities to guide people one-on-one. Like I developed a lot of unique single friendships that found me as a 5/1 that used my heresy and projection field to like call me into their lives and guide them. And yeah, I had a lot of moments that I don't have anymore, which makes me sad. But like I was in an environment in which there was a lot more chaos and mutation. An educational environment is much more kitchens than living at home as a hermit in your bedroom. There's not a lot of, I mean, there's the kitchen here, but it's not a big collective kitchen of like people bumping into one another. So I don't necessarily think my degree was correct for me or living with a generator all the time or all those things, but I did see a lot of invitations. So there's like that mix, which is interesting because like, you hop onto your locked in trajectory of your correct motivation and it becomes the overwhelming tipping point. But it's possible to have things be correct and incorrect together at the same time, just like different parts of an invitation might be correct and another part might be incorrect. And it's not 100% yes or no or black and white. There's a lot of gray matter. So I just wanted to share that I
That is
realized.
interesting. Well, and something I just want to ask is, did you feel truly recognized as yourself, or were you recognized or were you recognized in a way, but it wasn't like, the way that projectors get recognized all the time for stuff that, we get invited to, but it's not actually correct for us because of our auras?
Um, I would say like based on who I was then, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I might not be recognized for those things now today, but back then, like I had a degree in hospitality, and as a logical person, my best classes were the mathematical ones. So in finance class, I just like was the student. I was Hermione, always raising my hand because the answers were just blatantly obvious because there's only one answer and it's there. It's math. And so being in that position, being recognized for my logical intelligence, two different students who were in the class with me asked me to tutor them. As I was learning the material, I was also teaching them. And so I received those invitations, which I feel like did correctly recognize me as being someone able to explain logic to someone else. Um, but also, like at that point, I was in my spiritual journey, really into law of attraction, received invitations to help people like process their own lives, friends of just like how to be more optimistic, how to see the silver lining, things like that. And they recognized who I was back then, which again was that a not self version of me to a certain extent, yes, but not overwhelmingly so. I saw a recent post. Um, about someone on a Facebook group. I feel like I'm always sharing about like saw a post on a Facebook group. There's another post on a Facebook group I want to mention, but I saw a post on a Facebook group about someone saying that, they felt like they were more correct. And then when they came into human design, they started overthinking things and over mentally processing all the decisions that they were making before it was second nature to just, wait for invitations and use their authority, whatever it was. But then once they learned human design, they started over doing the whole mental masturbation thing and overthinking everything and just getting into the weeds about it all. And now they find it a lot more difficult to make decisions correctly as themselves. So, um, I forgot how that relates to what I was saying, but the other post was one about someone spraining their ankle, and like I have personal uh stories or anecdotes, or I can relate to that because like I think did I share here before? I don't know what I shared here, but I sprained my ankle correctly. I think I shared this last time or the time before. I was invited to go to a funeral. It was totally correct. I felt so correct in the car. As soon as I got out of the car, I sprained my ankle. And that is something that you would say, like, how is that correct? But it was, even though it wasn't a pleasant experience. So like things are gray. Like spraining your ankle, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm successful. I successfully sprained my ankle. However, the situation, like all the puzzle pieces were laid out for it to be correct. I don't
Well,
know. Correctness, no choice. Big,
yeah,
heavy conversations.
it is. Well, and it's also, there's a few things that, I know we probably should start winding down for the day, but um one thing that hit me is just how much your determination doesn't just have to do with the food you consume, but everything that you consume. And thinking about how perhaps like you were more correct in your body there. Like perhaps your physicality was more correct in college.
Yeah.
Because of that stimulating environment. Whereas for me, it was like the exact opposite, right? Like
Yeah.
I was falling deeper and deeper into the not self because everything I was consuming in this deeply stimulating environment. And so it's like I could see how my body and my mind were in the wind. It's like totally not self mind. There was nothing correct within me. Like zero. Like there really, really wasn't. And that's also part of the woes of being a split definition emotional projector with mental definition. Um, because you can just live your whole life with your mind and not and probably get some kind of stomach problems and down the line, but just kind of avoid your emotional authority. And what I discovered, because obviously I was sick, I had acne, I got really bad acne in college. I think my body was more correct when I was able to be at home by myself for many hours at a time in a calm environment. And then when I went to college, it's like my body, I was still in not self as I was, being conditioned in high school. But then when I went to college, it was like my body and my mind, which is less likely to happen to specifically generators. But what it sounds like is that your body was probably correct, although your mind,
My body had issues. I burnout. Like I was doing the whole generator thing. It's like I
yeah,
was not self in the sense that I was overcommitting, like signing on for extra classes, sneaking into classes that I couldn't take because my schedule was so full. Like, which if you're a generator and you love to learn, here's great advice. Find a large class that you don't necessarily want to take a test on and just show up and learn and sit in the back. Because I tried asking the teacher, can I, sit in your class? He's like, no, you can audit it, but to audit, you still have to pay. So I was sneaking into classes I was not in. Like I was full on overcommitted with my no motors to the generator thing, super slave projector in the educational sense, and burnt out and had chronic headaches and like would go to the neurologist over there, get MRIs and CT scans, and they had no idea what was wrong with me. So my body was not correct, not in that sense, not in the like where my not self centers were like overproving myself and not
yeah,
knowing when enough was enough.
yeah. Well, I mean, again, all of this stuff is just, it's like, there's something to be said about things not being black and white. Although it's hard for me to not think that your vibration is either yourself or you're not self, and you're not in some kind of weird in between. Um, because maybe there is a limbo. I don't know. I'm not the final judge on this stuff, but it is hard for me to fathom the idea that you're like half vibrating as yourself and half making decisions as yourself and half making decisions that, I think it comes down to from decision to decision. Like, I really think that's what it comes down to. I think each decision, you make a decision as yourself or as your not self, and that decision making brings you further in one, trajectory or in another. But there's millions of trajectories. So, I don't know. This is a very complicated topic that we should not be handling at the end of the podcast. So let's just call it a day. And, you guys all can chime in if you think that there is, gray area between the frequencies of yourself and your not self, between the frequencies of your transference and your motivation. Like, I am undecided on the matter, and um I know how complicated it is and how layered and how multivalent. So it's not to say that it's like black and white. The mind wants it to be black and white. So it's not like, I know that things can be black and white, but I do feel like there is a self and a not self that makes decisions. And there's not like a halfy that makes decisions. So anyway, Laura, do you want to say anything before we end for the day?
No, I feel like we've had enough.
I
My
know
sacral center is sated.
that was a lot, everybody. That was a lot. That took a lot out of me because we really hit some serious points here. Big, gigantic questions. It also made me want to listen to rave cosmology, but let's not drop out of psychology.
Lock in, don't drop out. That's going to be their title.
Oh God, it makes me sick to drop out. I mean, I do it so much. Anyway, okay, well, thank you again, everyone, for being here and listening. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Oh, we
We
have an Instagram account now if you want to give us a follow for Projector Stories on Instagram. There's
yeah,
nothing there, but if you're a fan, please go follow us. I don't know what's going to come up on that page,
who
but at
knows.
least it's a way for you to connect if you don't feel like emailing, if you prefer a more informal form of communication.
I cannot believe that Projector Stories wasn't taken, and it just feels so right. It just feels so right. It feels so right. I'm so happy
It
that it
was
was
waiting for us.
waiting for us. Yeah. So anyway, follow us on Instagram and talk to us about our questions that we have, our existential questions, and or just about regular stuff. And obviously you can reach out via email from the show notes, or in any of the other ways on TikTok for me. And yeah, so Laura.
Catch you on the flip side. That's just my go-to ending.
All right,
That's
everybody.
it. Thanks
Yeah.
for listening.
Thanks for listening. See ya.